Welcome back to Football Daily, where today, in honour of Halloween, we are covering 10 downright evil footballers. And we aren't talking tryhards like Vinnie Jones, we want the scum of the earth, moralless players who poisoned the beautiful game. Marco Materazzi. No one can dispute Materazzi's record, a 21-year career littered with 5 Scudetti, 4 Coppa Italias, a Champions League and a World Cup. But intertwined with the victory was the violence. After spells in the Italian lower divisions, Walter Smith brought him to Everton in the summer of 1998, where he garnered his reputation as a hot-headed liability. 4 red cards in 27 appearances followed before he was sent back to Italy. But it's unfair to describe him as purely a thug. After all, he scored 55 career goals, as many as Sergio Ramos for Real, including 12 for Perugia in 2001, breaking the Serie A single-season scoring record for a defender in the process. And he won 41 Azzurri caps at a time when Italy had defenders of the quality of Maldini, Nesta and Cannavaro. But he was without doubt the most brutal defender of his generation. From getting a 2-month ban for punching Siena's Bruno Cirillo in 2004, elbowing Villarreal's Juan Pablo Sorin 2 years later, countless appalling tackles, and of course provoking Zizou in that infamous game in 2006, Materazzi's career is littered with incident. Talented, determined, a winner most definitely, an evil player undoubtedly. Pablo Alfaro. Born in Zaragoza, Pablo Alfaro played as a defender for 7 clubs including Atletico Madrid and Barcelona, and made over 100 appearances for Zaragoza, Racing Santander and Sevilla. He was sent off 30 times in 552 appearances, an average of a red card every 18 games. For context, Duncan Ferguson, who holds the joint record for the most Premier League red cards with 8, averaged a dismissal every 34 league games. But Alfaro, a trained doctor, isn't on this list because of his recklessness, but instead because of his actions in a Copa del Rey clash against Atletico Madrid in 2004. He took his medical background a step too far, and during a tangle with Rojiblancos forward Touché, stuck his finger up his arse. Whilst not a criminal offence, it's pretty out of order. This incident, alongside his reputation for razor-sharp elbows and all-round bad behaviour, earned him the nickname Dr. Death. Pepe. Pepe once complained, "I get a raw deal in 60% of games. If I foul someone, it's like I've killed them." But we have very little sympathy for the 35-year-old Besiktas centre-back, who has a rap sheet a hardened criminal would be proud of. Across his 16-year career, he stamped on Messi's hand, kneecapped Dani Alves, slapped Iniesta, headbutted Thomas Müller, and kicked Getafe's Xavi Casquero twice in a matter of seconds. The later incident was topped off by striking Juan Albin in the face, forcing the Spanish FA to slap a 10-match ban on the Portuguese international. When he wasn't suspended, the thuggish Pepe was a superb player. Nearly 230 appearances for Real Madrid, over 100 caps for Portugal, 3 Champions Leagues, and of course the 2016 Euros, where he was his country's key player, testify to this. His actions in the 2016 Champions League final, the endless harassment of the referee, shameless diving and play acting had fans around the world questioning whether Pepe had a conscience, or whether he was just pure evil. Andoni Goycochea. Despite having played for Athletic Bilbao and Atletico Madrid, won 39 caps for La Roja, played at a World Cup and the Euros, you've probably never heard of Andoni Goycochea. But his nickname, the Butcher of Bilbao, a cursed name in parts of Spain and across Europe, now lives in infamy. In 1981, he tore the knee ligaments of Barcelona's Bernd Schuster with a horrific tackle, an injury from which the German never fully recovered. He followed this up 2 years later by nearly robbing football of one of its greatest ever players. In another game against the Blaugrana, he launched himself through the air with both feet off the ground and collided with Diego Maradona's left leg halfway up the shin, instantly breaking the magician's ankle. It was labelled the most brutal foul in Spanish football history, and Maradona compared the sound of the impact to wood breaking. His manager Cesar Menotti accused the Spaniard of belonging to a race of anti-footballers and called for a lifetime ban. The Spanish authorities handed him a 10-game ban, but rather than show a hint of remorse, the Butcher had the boot he had worn framed in a glass case at his home. What's worse is that he didn't learn and was handed an 18-game ban for kicking Maradona in the chest in the 1984 Copa del Rey. René Higuita. Think of René Higuita and memories of his high-risk sweeper-keeper tactics, his superb 1990 World Cup performances, and of course that scorpion kick will spring to mind. But what you might not know is that the 68-capped Colombian was involved in a kidnapping deal. Known for his bold advances from his goalmouth, El Loco strayed beyond the legal bounds of the South American nation's law when in May 1993 the family of 11-year-old Marcela Melona got in contact with him. Marcela had been kidnapped in Higuita's hometown of Medellin, and her father, a suspected money launderer in a drug cartel, contacted the then 24-year-old Higuita, knowing he had numerous contacts in the city's poorer neighborhoods. The keeper ended up paying her $300,000 ransom, and the Molina family rewarded him with a $50,000 payment. Higuita was then arrested and charged with illicit enrichment, mediating without authority, and failing to inform the police a kidnapping had taken place. He was in prison for 7 months before being released without charge, and while some people claim Higuita was a hero in this instance, others believe the close friend of Pablo Escobar, the notorious Colombian gang leader, was a decidedly dodgy character. Marlon King. 38-year-old Marlon King was without doubt a talented player across his 15-year career, which apart from a 3-year spell, was spent in the second and third tiers of English football. But he is also a terrible person. His long list of indiscretions, which include theft, criminal damage, deception, speeding, drink driving, and assault on a woman, making it almost impossible to believe that he was able to continue playing football until 2013. The lowlights of his crimes read as follows. In 2002, whilst playing for Gillingham, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison for having stolen goods in his BMW. The club continued to pay his salary whilst he was in jail, and managed to halve his prison sentence. Just 6 years later, he was arrested and convicted of sexual assault. He served 18 months and was placed on the sex offenders list for 7 years. You'd think at this stage he'd have learned his lesson, but no. In 2013, he was arrested for 2 separate car incidents, severely injuring someone in a crash, and then he was involved in a hit and run. Gavin Grant. Grant was a journeyman footballer, capable of playing as a winger or a forward, who played for the likes of Millwall, Wycombe Wanderers, Gillingham and Bradford City. He was released by Watford at the age of 16 and his football career stalled. He meandered into a life of crime on his notorious North East London estate, Stonebridge. In 2008, former England caretaker Peter Taylor, Grant's manager at Wycombe, championed Grant's abilities. But 2 years later, those words were turned to dust when his past life caught up with him. He was convicted alongside 2 others of carrying out the execution-style murder 6 years earlier, believing he was behind a robbery on his cousin's house. A 25-year prison sentence followed and Grant's career was over. Alexandre Villaplane. Alexandre Villaplane was a French midfielder who won 25 caps for his country and captained his nation at the inaugural FIFA World Cup in 1930. A talented player who played for Antibes in the first ever Ligue 1 season, he had questionable morals, which were on display from an early age. His side were disqualified from the competition for corruption and he ended the following season and his career in prison for his part in a horse-fixing scandal. After getting out of prison, he was then employed by the Nazis, who recruited members of the criminal underworld to conduct counter-insurgency operations against the French resistance. By 1944, he was head of a section of the North African Brigade. His fierce personality and ruthlessness earned him the nickname the SS Mohammed. His extreme brutality was shown by his actions in June 1944 in Aymet, in southwestern France, where he ordered the execution of 52 people. He was caught later that year and the former French captain was sentenced to death by the firing squad. A truly evil man. Nizar Trabelsi. We continue our descent down the list of football's most despicable characters with former footballer Nizar Trabelsi. The Tunisian's football career, which went from 1989 to 1994, was short-lived but did include a season at current Bundesliga side Fortuna Düsseldorf. After hanging up his boots, Trabelsi regularly travelled to Afghanistan and met international terrorist and renowned Arsenal fan Osama bin Laden. In 2001, Trabelsi was suspected of plotting an attack on the US Embassy in Paris, which was foiled and prevented. Just 2 days after the horrific 9/11 attacks, he was finally arrested after a plot was uncovered to blow up 2 planes going to the US. Trabelsi was extradited from his house near Brussels to the US to face charges of conspiring to kill American citizens abroad, conspiring to use weapons of mass destruction, and for supporting a terrorist organisation. Barry Bennell. Barry Bennell, a former youth player at Chelsea, is one of British football's most disgusting characters. After his playing career came to an end, Bennell became a junior football coach and a scout who boasted that he could find clubs their next young stars. In fact, the 64-year-old was a prolific sex offender and a predatory paedophile who preyed upon young boys whose only ambition was to become a professional. Bennell worked most notoriously with Crew Alexandra, known for its high-quality youth academy during the 1980s and 1990s, but was also linked to a number of other teams including Man City. He had already served 2 separate prison sentences, one of which was in the US, when Andy Woodward spoke to The Guardian in 2016 about the sexual abuse Bennell inflicted on him when he was a child. This forced a number of people to come forward, and he was eventually found guilty of 55 cases of abuse, and he was sentenced to 454 years in prison. He was described during his trial as sheer evil.
So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more great content from FD, then click right here. And of course, follow us all on Twitter. Make sure that you're subscribed to all our channels, and we'll see you next time.